A millionaire decides to humiliate a simple waitress in front of the entire board of directors. He asks for her opinion just to get a laugh and show who is in charge. What no one imagined was that her answer would change everything in that room. If this beautiful story of resilience and love interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching from. Continuing. The morning sun streamed through the mirrored windows of the most imposing commercial building on Wall Street, New York City. On the 43rd floor, the headquarters of Sterling Investments occupied an entire level, featuring glass-walled meeting rooms, Italian designer furniture, and a privileged view of the city that never stops. There, where every second was worth millions, the decisions made moved fortunes and defined the destinies of entire corporations. Robert Sterling commanded that financial empire with an iron fist. At 52, he was known in the market not only for his ability to predict economic movements with surgical precision, but also for his explosive temperament and boundless arrogance. Those who worked for him knew that a single sideways glance was enough to feel the weight of his authority. Robert didn't ask, he ordered, he didn't suggest, he determined, and anyone who dared to cross him paid dearly for their audacity. On that Thursday morning, the atmosphere at the company was even more tense than usual. An extraordinary meeting had been called to discuss a multi-million-dollar proposal from an international fund. The report had arrived the previous evening, bringing complex numbers and suggestions for strategic changes in Sterling Investments' portfolio. It was the kind of decision that could yield significant profits or generate irreparable losses. In the main boardroom, 10 executives were already waiting for Robert's arrival. All were dressed in impeccable suits, carrying tablets with detailed charts and wearing serious expressions. Michael Saunders, the chief financial officer, was reviewing the risk projections for the third time. Victoria Miller, the analysis manager, tried to hide her nervousness by flipping through the printed report. Frank Garrison, the vice president, simply tapped his fingers on the table, already predicting that the meeting would be difficult. When Robert entered the room, the silence was immediate. He didn't greet anyone. He simply threw his briefcase onto the glass table, pulled out his chair and sat down with the posture of someone about to judge incompetent subordinates. "So where is the coffee?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the report in his hands. One of the assistants hurried to the hallway and made a discreet gesture. A few seconds later, Maya Sullivan entered the room, pushing a stainless steel cart with a coffee maker, porcelain cups and small jars of sugar and sweetener. She wore a simple navy blue uniform with the logo of the third-party service company stamped on her chest. Her brown hair was tied back in a discreet bun, and she kept her eyes down as she moved around the room, serving coffee to the executives. To most people there, Maya was invisible, just another contracted worker, whose only function was to ensure the drinks were served and disappear without drawing attention. No one knew her name. No one cared. She was part of the furniture, an element of the corporate scenery that didn't deserve a second of consideration. Maya was already used to it. She had been working at that company for almost 2 years, serving coffee in meetings where they discussed matters she understood perfectly, but on which she could never offer an opinion. She had learned to become transparent, to make no noise, to not be a bother. It was the best strategy for surviving in that environment. As she served Robert's coffee, she felt the weight of his gaze on her, but she didn't look up. She placed the cup in front of him carefully, making sure the saucer was aligned with the edge of the table. She was about to step away when Robert began to speak, and his voice echoed through the room like thunder. "So is someone here going to explain to me why this report is on my desk, suggesting that we put 50 million into a fund that can barely present a consistent track record of profitability?" Michael cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Sterling, the proposal considers portfolio diversification and entry into emerging markets that have shown above-average growth." "Above-average growth," Robert repeated sarcastically. "Did you read the footnotes of this report, Michael? Did you really read them? Or did you just glance at them and come here to repeat what's written in the executive summary?" Michael swallowed hard. "I analyzed the data, sir. The whole team analyzed it." "The whole team," Robert mocked, looking at the other executives. "So the whole team agreed that it's a good idea to risk 50 million based on projections that don't even take into account the currency volatility of the last 6 months." Victoria tried to intervene. "Mr. Sterling, perhaps we could request a review of the risk model before making a final decision." Robert slammed his hand on the table. "Review of the risk model? You earn six-figure salaries to do exactly that, Victoria, to analyze risk, and now you come to tell me you need more time to do your basic job? The atmosphere in the room turned heavy. No one dared to respond. Frank tried to change the subject, suggesting they discuss other parts of the report, but Robert interrupted him mid-sentence with an impatient gesture. It was at that moment that Maya, while serving coffee to Victoria, felt her hand shake slightly. A single drop fell from the coffee pot and hit the edge of the printed report on the table, leaving a small brown stain on the paper. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert slowly turned his head toward Maya. His eyes narrowed and an expression of contempt took over his face. "Seriously?" he said, pointing to the stain. "You have one single function here. One. Serve coffee without spilling it, and you can't even do that right." Maya felt the blood rush to her face. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll clean it immediately." She took a napkin and began to carefully dry the stain, but Robert wouldn't let the matter drop. "Look at this, everyone," he said, addressing the executives with a cynical smile. "We pay a fortune to hire the best analysts in the market, and in the end, even the coffee girl can't do her job without ruining important documents." A few executives chuckled softly, trying to please the boss. Maya kept her eyes fixed on the paper she was drying, feeling the humiliation burn like fire. Robert, however, was not satisfied. He had found an outlet for his frustration and decided to push even further. "You know what?" he continued, looking at Maya with disdain. "Since the highly qualified directors present here can't give me a decent answer about this report, maybe you can give your opinion. After all, since you're here staining documents, you could at least contribute something useful." The entire room burst into laughter. Michael smiled awkwardly. Victoria looked away, pretending not to see. Frank shook his head, like someone who found the joke in poor taste, but didn't have the courage to defend the woman. Robert crossed his arms, clearly satisfied with his own cruel humor. "So, young lady, what is your analysis of this financial report? Do you think we should invest 50 million in the proposed fund or not?" He expected Maya to bow her head, mutter an apology, and run out of the room. Everyone expected it. It was the obvious script for that kind of situation. The humiliated waitress would flee in shame and the meeting would continue, as if nothing had happened. But something different happened. Maya stopped drying the stain. She slowly straightened her back. And then, for the first time since entering that room, she raised her eyes and looked Robert Sterling directly in the face. The change in her posture was so subtle it almost went unnoticed, but Robert saw it. There was something in that woman's expression he didn't expect. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something close to determination. And when Maya opened her mouth to speak, her voice came out firm and clear. "Mr. Sterling, if you really want my opinion, I would say that investing in this fund without a deep revision would be a grave mistake. The report presents inconsistencies that any minimally attentive analyst should have identified." Robert's smile vanished. The laughter ceased instantly. 10 pairs of eyes turned to Maya with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Maya continued, ignoring the stunned silence that had taken over the room. "The risk model used in this report is based on 5-year historical data, but it completely ignores the currency crisis from 18 months ago. The profitability projections assume a stability that simply does not exist in the current scenario. Furthermore, if you look at page 17, you will notice that the fund's operating costs are underestimated by at least 20%, which compromises the entire feasibility analysis." Michael's eyes widened. Victoria froze. Frank let his pen drop onto the table. Maya pointed to the report. "And there's more. The proposed diversification isn't real. 3 of the listed assets have an extremely high correlation with each other, which means that in the event of a crisis, they will all plummet together. You aren't diversifying risk, you are multiplying it. If you approve this investment without demanding corrections, Sterling Investments could lose not only the 50 million, but also its credibility in the market when this error comes to light." The silence that followed was absolute. Robert Sterling, the man who was never at a loss for words, was completely mute, staring at the woman he had been trying to humiliate moments ago. Maya put the napkin back on the cart and looked directly at Robert. "My recommendation is simple. Reject the proposal. Demand a new corrected version before the fund itself realizes the error and tries to push this problem onto another firm. And then, without waiting for a response, She took the coffee cart and left the room, leaving behind a group of completely stunned executives and an arrogant millionaire who, for the first time in many years, didn't know what to say. The silence that filled the boardroom after Maya left was the kind that makes the air feel heavy. No one moved. No one spoke. The 10 highest-paid executives at Sterling Investments were paralyzed, processing what had just happened. The coffee server, that woman they didn't even look in the eye, had just dismantled a complex financial report with more precision and clarity than any of them had managed to do. Robert Sterling remained seated at the head of the table, staring at the door through which Maya had disappeared. His expression had changed completely. The mocking smile, the confident arrogance, all of it had evaporated. In its place remained only a mix of shock and something he rarely felt: shame. Michael was the first to try and break the silence. "Mr. Sterling, I think, well, perhaps we should review the report more carefully before making any decision." Robert slowly turned his head toward him. "Review the report," he repeated in a low, controlled voice that was even scarier than his usual shouting. "You think, Michael? You think maybe we should review it?" Michael swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." Victoria tried to help. "Her analysis makes sense, Mr. Sterling. If we check the points she mentioned, especially regarding the asset correlation and the underestimated operating costs, we might identify the inconsistencies." Robert slammed his hand on the table with force, making everyone jump. Might identify. You earn massive salaries to identify exactly those inconsistencies before a coffee server has to point out the obvious to you. Frank tried one last defense. "Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, no one here expected her to have technical knowledge on the subject. Expected or not, Frank, the fact is she does. And more than that, she identified errors that you all let slip. Errors that could cost the company $50 million. Robert stood up abruptly, grabbed the report and threw it toward Michael. "I want a full analysis of this document by tomorrow morning, and I don't want any more nonsense. I want every number checked, every projection revised, every comma verified. You are going to confirm whether this woman is right or not." "Yes, sir," Michael replied, holding the report with trembling hands. Robert walked to the window, turning his back on everyone. "And I want to know who she is. Who is the coffee woman? Full name, professional history, everything. Does anyone here know anything about her?" The executives exchanged glances. Victoria was the one who answered. "She works for the staffing agency that handles the pantry service, sir. We don't have much information on the contracted staff. They fall under HR's responsibility." "Then call HR, now. I want that information on my desk before the end of the day." "Yes, sir," Victoria said, already reaching for her phone. Robert continued looking out the window, watching the New York skyline stretch to the horizon. His reflection in the glass showed a disturbed man, and he knew it. It wasn't just the humiliation of being corrected by someone he had tried to ridicule. It was something deeper. That woman had knowledge of the financial market, real, technical, precise knowledge, and she was serving coffee. How did someone with that level of ability end up pushing a coffee cart through corporate hallways? What had happened in her life to bring her to that point? And why on earth had he never noticed her? Meanwhile, in the hallway, Maya pushed the cart back to the pantry with her legs shaking. The adrenaline that had sustained her during those minutes in the boardroom was beginning to fade, and now she felt the weight of what she had just done. She had exposed herself. After 2 years of keeping her head down, being invisible, and playing her role without drawing attention, she had broken all her own survival rules. Arriving at the pantry, she put the cart in the corner and leaned her hands on the sink, taking a deep breath. Her hands were still shaking slightly. Her face was hot. For a moment, she closed her eyes and tried to calm down. "What did you do, Maya?" she whispered to herself. "What did you do?" The pantry door opened, and Julie, one of the other contracted employees, walked in with a worried look. "Maya, what happened up there? Everyone is saying there was some kind of problem in the board meeting." Maya turned on the faucet and splashed her face with cold water. "It was nothing, Julie. Just a small incident." Julie wasn't convinced. "You're shaking. Are you sure everything is okay?" Maya dried her face with a paper towel and forced a smile. "I'm fine. I just need to keep working." But she knew she wasn't fine. She knew that what had happened in that room wouldn't just go away. Robert Sterling wasn't the kind of man who let things slide, and she had just done something he would never expect from someone in her position. While Maya tried to return to her routine on the 43rd floor, the investigation into her identity was already underway. Victoria immediately called Sarah, the HR coordinator, and asked direct questions. Who is the contracted employee serving coffee to the board? What are her details? Sarah was confused by the urgent tone. Is there a problem, Victoria? I just need the information, full name, history, everything you have in the system. Checking now, Sarah replied, accessing the database. Let's see here. The employee who attends to the board is Maya Sullivan, 37 years old. She's been with us for 1 year and 10 months. Before that, we don't have much history because she came through the agency. They don't provide many details beyond the basics. Victoria wrote down the name, Maya Sullivan. Anything else? Education, previous experience, anything? Sarah typed a few more commands. It says here she has a university degree, a bachelor's in economics from Columbia University. That's strange. Usually the people working in the pantry don't have that level of education. Victoria felt a chill. Economics from Columbia? Is there any information about previous professional experience? No, here it only shows the start date with the agency and the assignment to our unit. If you want more details, you'd have to ask the agency that hired her directly. Victoria thanked her and hung up. She walked back to Robert's office and knocked. When he authorized her entry, she placed the paper with the notes on the desk. Mr. Sterling, I got some information. Her name is Maya Sullivan, 37 years old, graduated in economics from Columbia. Robert took the paper and read the information in silence. Economics from Columbia, he murmured, and she's working as a server. That doesn't make sense. I thought it was strange too, sir. I'll try to get more information about her professional history. Robert shook his head. No, I want to speak with her personally. Find out where she is now and ask her to come up here. Victoria hesitated. Sir, maybe it's better to wait until we have more information. We don't want her to feel intimidated or... Victoria, Robert interrupted firmly. Find this woman and ask her to come up now. Yes, sir. 15 minutes later, Maya was standing in front of Robert Sterling's office door. Her heart was racing. Julie had come to the pantry saying the president wanted to speak with her immediately. Maya knew this moment would come. She knew she would have to face the consequences of what she had done. She knocked on the door and heard Robert's deep voice telling her to enter. Upon opening the door, she found Robert sitting behind a massive dark wood desk, with the New York skyline framed by the windows behind him. He wasn't alone. Victoria was there, standing beside the desk, with a neutral expression on her face. Sit down, Maya, Robert said, pointing to the chair in front of the desk. Maya sat, keeping her hands in her lap and her posture straight. She wasn't going to show weakness. Not now. Robert was silent for a few seconds, just observing her. Finally, he spoke. I want you to explain something to me. How is someone with an economics degree from Columbia working serving coffee at an investment firm? Maya kept her gaze steady. Because I needed a job, Mr. Sterling, and this was the job I got. That's not a complete answer, and you know it. An economist from Columbia doesn't end up serving coffee by accident. What happened to your career? Maya took a deep breath. That's personal, sir. Robert leaned forward. It might be personal, but after what happened today in that boardroom, it stopped being irrelevant. You challenged my authority, humbled my board, and proved you have high-level technical knowledge. Now I want to know who you really are. Maya felt the anger begin to simmer inside her. I am an employee who serves coffee, Mr. Sterling. You made that very clear yourself this morning, or have you already forgotten? Robert clenched his teeth. I haven't forgotten, and I admit I was rude. But now I need to understand what's going on here. You have knowledge of the financial market. Real knowledge. Where did you work before? Maya hesitated. For a moment, she thought about simply standing up and leaving the room. But something in Robert's expression, a mix of genuine curiosity and perhaps even regret, made her answer. I worked in investment analysis for almost 10 years. I was with 3 different firms. The last one was Archer Capital Management. I was a senior analyst responsible for audit reports and risk assessment. Victoria's eyes widened. Archer Capital? That's one of the largest management firms in the country. It was, Maya corrected. I left the company 3 years ago. Why? Robert asked. Because life happened, Mr. Sterling. Because not everything is solved with money and position. And because some choices we make out of love, not for a career. Robert fell silent, processing those words. There was something in Maya's voice, a deep pain she was trying to hide, but it leaked through the cracks. "What happened 3 years ago, Maya?" he asked, this time in a softer tone. Maya looked toward the window, seeing the city outside. "My husband got sick, very sick. He needed long-term treatment, constant care. I couldn't keep working full-time and take care of him at the same time, so I chose. I resigned, used all my savings on his treatment, and stayed by his side until the end." "Until the end," Robert repeated softly. Maya looked back at him. "He passed away 2 years ago, Mr. Sterling. And when it was all over, I had no more money, no more contacts in the market, and I had been out for too long to get back into my field. So I took the first job that came up, and that job was serving coffee." The silence that followed was dense and charged with emotion. Victoria looked away, clearly touched by the story. Robert stared at Maya with an expression she couldn't decipher. Finally, he said, "You can go now, Maya. Thank you for being honest." Maya stood up and walked to the door, but before leaving, she turned back to Robert. "Mr. Sterling, just to be clear, I didn't challenge your authority today. I only answered a question you asked me. If you didn't want to hear the answer, you shouldn't have asked." And with those words, Maya left the room, leaving Robert Sterling alone with his thoughts and a weight in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. Robert Sterling couldn't sleep that night. He tossed and turned in the bed of his Upper East Side apartment, his mind restless. The image of Maya responding with surgical precision about the financial report repeated in his head like a film on loop. And worse than that, the image of himself humiliating that woman in front of the entire board haunted him in a way he couldn't explain. Robert wasn't a man who usually cared about others' feelings. He had built his empire by being tough when necessary, making unpopular decisions. He had always believed that this coldness was an essential virtue for surviving in the business world. But something in Maya's story had shaken him deeply. She had abandoned a promising career to care for her sick husband. She had spent all her savings on a treatment that couldn't save him. And then, alone and without resources, she took a humble job just to survive. There was no self-pity in the way she told it, just facts presented with dignity. And perhaps it was exactly that dignity that bothered Robert more than anything else. When the sun rose over New York, he was already awake, having coffee on the balcony and looking at the city beginning to wake up. The first light of day illuminated the buildings of Manhattan, and Robert knew he needed answers. He picked up his phone and called Christopher Manning, his personal lawyer and confidant for over 20 years. Chris answered on the third ring. "Robert, it's 6 in the morning. What happened?" "I need you to do an investigation for me, thorough and discreet. I want every professional detail on a person." "Who?" "Maya Sullivan. Economist, graduated from Columbia, worked at Archer Capital Management until 3 years ago. I want to know everything about her career. Projects she developed, reports she signed, everything." Chris paused. "Can I ask why this sudden interest?" "Just do it, Chris, and I want the information today." "Today?" "Robert, I don't care what you have to do. I want that information on my desk by the end of the afternoon." Robert hung up without waiting for a reply and went back to looking at the city. There was something he needed to understand. Maya wasn't just a qualified economist. She had demonstrated a level of technical knowledge that went beyond what was expected, and he needed to find out exactly who she had been before life brought her to that pantry serving coffee. Meanwhile, at Sterling Investments, Michael and his team spent the entire night reviewing the International Fund Report. Every number was verified, every projection was recalculated, and as they progressed in the analysis, the expressions on the executives' faces grew increasingly grim. When Robert arrived at the office at 8 in the morning, Michael was already waiting at his door with a thick envelope in his hands and deep, dark circles under his eyes. "Mr. Sterling, I need to speak with you." Robert opened the door and walked in, followed by Michael. "Sit down and tell me what you found." Michael placed the envelope on the desk. "We checked every point Maya mentioned yesterday, every single one without exception. And sir, she was right about absolutely everything." Robert felt his stomach tighten. "Go on." Michael opened the envelope and spread several documents across the desk. "The risk model really does ignore the currency crisis from 18 months ago. The profitability projections assume a stability that simply doesn't exist in the current scenario. Operating costs are underestimated by 22%, not 20 as she estimated, which makes the situation even worse. And as for the asset correlation, She was right again. 3 of the 5 main assets have an 87% correlation. In a crisis, they would all crash simultaneously. Robert closed his eyes for a moment. How much would we have lost if we had approved this investment? Michael took a deep breath. In a conservative projection, between 45 and 50 million in the first year. In a realistic projection, considering all the model's errors, we could have lost up to 70 million. 70 million, Robert repeated softly. Yes, sir. And there's more. We spoke with some contacts in the market. This same fund is being offered to 3 other investment firms. If we'd approved it and the error came to light later, our reputation would have been completely destroyed. Robert fell silent, absorbing the information. A coffee server had identified in minutes what his entire team of highly paid analysts couldn't see. And more than that, she had saved the company from a financial and reputational disaster. Send a message to the fund, Robert finally said. Reject the proposal. And make it clear that we identified serious inconsistencies in the risk model. I want them to know we aren't amateurs. Yes, sir. Michael hesitated before continuing. And as for Maya, sir, what about her? The whole team is talking about what happened yesterday. Some are saying you should thank her officially. Others are suggesting she could be utilized somehow in the analysis department. Robert looked out the window. I'll handle that personally. You can go, Michael. When Michael left, Robert sat back down and stared at the documents spread across the desk. 70 million. Maya had saved the company from losing $70 million, and he had humiliated her publicly. The phone rang. It was Chris. Robert, I got the information, but there's something you need to know. This woman is not who you think she is. What do you mean? Maya Sullivan wasn't just some ordinary analyst at Archer Capital. She was one of the best in the market. Specialized in auditing and risk assessment, she signed some of the most important reports of the last 10 years. She has international recognition and has spoken at financial market conferences. Robert felt a chill run up his spine. Go on. And there's more. I'm sending some documents via email now. But Robert, there's one thing you need to see for yourself. It's about a report she signed 6 years ago. A report that directly involved Sterling Investments. Robert felt his heart accelerate. What report is that? In 2018, your company went through an independent audit after that market confidence crisis. Remember that? Robert remembered perfectly. It had been one of the most difficult moments of his career. The company had almost not survived that period. I remember, the analyst responsible for the final report of that audit was Maya Sullivan. She was the one who examined all the operations, reviewed every transaction, and she was the one who concluded that the irregularities found were operational errors, not intentional fraud. Robert froze. It can't be. It can. It's all documented. She saved your company back then, Robert. If her report had concluded there was intentional manipulation, Sterling Investments would have been destroyed. You would have lost everything. But she analyzed the data with technical rigor and honesty and concluded they were errors, not crimes. Her opinion was what allowed you to keep operating. Robert stood up abruptly, walking to the window. He remembered the immense relief when the conclusions were favorable, but he had never paid attention to who had signed the report. And now he discovered it was Maya, the same woman he had humiliated. Robert, are you still there? Chris asked. I am. Send all the documents to my email now. They're on their way. Robert hung up and stared at the city without really seeing anything. Maya had saved his company, and he had treated her as insignificant. He opened Chris's email, academic articles, certifications, recommendation letters, and the 2018 audit report. He opened the PDF. There it was. Maya Sullivan, lead senior analyst. He read the conclusions. Maya had found errors, pointed out flaws, but recognized there was no bad faith. The irregularities were the result of rapid growth, not a deliberate attempt at fraud. If she had wanted to, she could have destroyed Sterling Investments. But she chose the truth. And the truth saved Robert. He closed his computer. He needed to do something. How do you apologize to someone you've publicly humiliated? Robert picked up the internal phone and called Victoria. She answered immediately. Mr. Sterling, locate Maya Sullivan. I want to see her in my office in 1 hour. Sir, she's already finished her shift. She must have left about 20 minutes ago. Then find her address and send a car to pick her up. Tell her it's urgent and that it's not an order, it's a personal request." Victoria was silent for a moment. "Sir, with all due respect, maybe it's not a good idea to send a car to her house. It might look like intimidation." Robert took a deep breath. "Victoria, I need to speak with this woman, today, and I need it to be here, where it all started. So please, find a way to contact her and ask if she can come. Tell her it won't take long and that I guarantee it will be worth it." "Very well, sir. I'll try." An hour later, Maya entered Robert Sterling's office again. This time she looked more tired, less prepared for a confrontation. She had just arrived home when she received Victoria's call. She thought about refusing, but something in the executive's voice suggested this was different. Robert was standing by the window when she entered. He turned slowly, and for the first time Maya saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't anger. It was something that looked like respect. "Thank you for coming, Maya. I know you had already finished your day." Maya crossed her arms. "What do you want, Mr. Sterling?" Robert walked to the desk and picked up a folder. He opened it and pulled out a printed copy of the 2018 audit report. "I want you to see this, and I want you to tell me if you recognize it." Maya looked at the document and felt her blood run cold. It was the audit report, that report that had marked her career so deeply. "I recognize it," she said softly. Robert put the report back on the desk. "You were the one who signed this report. You were the one who analyzed my company 6 years ago and concluded that the errors found weren't fraud." Maya didn't answer. She simply looked at him with an expression that mixed surprise and something close to pain. Robert continued, and for the first time his voice wavered. "I didn't know. All these years I never knew who the analyst was who saved my company. I never cared to find out. And now I find out it was you, the same woman I humiliated yesterday in front of my entire board." The silence that followed was dense and charged with emotion. Maya felt tears threaten to emerge, but she pushed them back. She wasn't going to cry in front of this man. "You don't need to thank me for doing my job, Mr. Sterling. I only analyzed the data and reached the correct technical conclusion. It's what I've always done." "I know," Robert said, and there was something close to humility in his voice. "But I should have known who you were. I should have paid attention. And more than that, I should never have treated you, or anyone else, the way I did yesterday." Maya took a step forward. "Are you apologizing to me?" Robert looked her directly in the eye. "I am, and I know an apology isn't enough, but it's the least I can do." Maya was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, "I accept your apology, Mr. Sterling. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go." She was almost at the door when Robert spoke again. "Maya, wait. There's one more thing I need to tell you." She stopped but didn't turn around. "I want to offer you a job, not as a coffee server, as the Director of Risk Analysis for Sterling Investments." Maya turned slowly, her eyes wide. "What?" And it was at that moment that everything began to change. Robert put the report back on the desk and stared at Maya for long seconds. There were so many things he needed to say, but words seemed insufficient to express the weight of what he was feeling. "You were the one who signed this report," he finally said. "You were the one who analyzed my company 6 years ago and concluded that the errors found weren't fraud." Maya didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained fixed on the document, and Robert could see the pain cross her face. That report represented much more than a technical job to her. It represented a moment in her life when she was still someone respected, when her opinion mattered, when she had a place in the world. "I remember that project," she said softly. "It was one of the most complex audits I ever conducted. It took me 3 months to review all of Sterling Investments' operations, every transaction, every document, every record. There was pressure from all sides for me to find evidence of fraud, but my job was never about what people wanted me to find. It was about the truth." Robert felt a tightening in his chest. "And the truth saved my company." Maya finally raised her eyes and looked at him. "The truth is that there was no fraud, Mr. Sterling. There were errors, yes. Flaws in internal controls, poorly documented procedures, growth faster than the structure could support. But there was no criminal intent, and I wasn't going to destroy a company and ruin lives based on something that didn't exist." "Why did you do it?" Robert asked, and there was a vulnerability in his voice he rarely showed. You could have written that report any way you wanted. You could have been harsher in the conclusions. But you chose to be fair. Maya gave a small bitter smile. Because that's what an analyst does, Mr. Sterling. I wasn't there to judge or condemn. I was there to analyze data and reach an honest technical conclusion. And honesty in that case meant recognizing that your company had structural problems but didn't have bad faith. Robert walked to the window and looked at the city. All these years, I never knew who you were. I never cared to find out the name of the person who saved everything I had built, and now I find out it was you, the same woman I humiliated yesterday in front of my entire board. The silence that followed was dense. Maya remained standing, arms crossed, waiting to see where this conversation would go. Robert turned to face her. I need to apologize to you, Maya, and I know apologies aren't enough. I know nothing I say will erase what I did yesterday, or compensate for the way you were treated here all these months. But I need you to know that I am deeply ashamed of my behavior. Maya felt tears burn in her eyes, but she pushed them back. She wasn't going to cry there, not in front of him. I accept your apology, she said with a controlled voice. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go. She was almost at the door when Robert spoke again, louder this time. Maya, wait. There's one more thing I need to tell you. She stopped, but didn't turn around. I want to offer you a job, not as a coffee server, as the Director of Risk Analysis for Sterling Investments. Maya turned slowly, her eyes wide. What? Robert took a few steps toward her. You saved this company from losing $70 million yesterday. You saved this company from being destroyed 6 years ago. You have technical knowledge I've never seen in anyone, and I would be an even bigger idiot than I've already been if I let you walk out of here without at least trying to correct this mistake. Maya shook her head, incredulous. Mr. Sterling, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I want you to take over the risk analysis department. A salary compatible with the position, profit sharing, all the structure you need. You would build your own team, have total autonomy to review all the company's investments. You would be the technical voice this organization desperately needs. Maya took a step back, as if Robert's words were a physical attack. You think you can just fix everything like this? You did what you did yesterday. You humiliated me in front of everyone, and now you believe a job offer is going to make everything okay? No, Robert said firmly. I don't think this fixes anything, but it's what I can offer. It's the only way I have to demonstrate that I recognize the mistake I made and that I want to give you the place you always should have had. Maya felt the anger boiling inside her. Where was this offer a year ago, Mr. Sterling? Where was it 6 months ago? Where was it yesterday morning before I opened my mouth in that meeting? You're only doing this because you found out who I am, because you realized I can be useful. But during all this time I was here, serving coffee to you and your executives, I was the same person. I had the same knowledge, the same ability, but I was invisible. You're right, Robert admitted, and there was genuine pain in his voice. You're completely right. I should have seen it. I should have paid attention. I should have treated you and every other employee with respect and dignity, regardless of the position they held. But I didn't. And now all I can do is try to be better. Maya turned her face away, fighting back tears. I need to think. How much time do you need? I don't know. A day, maybe 2. This is very sudden, Mr. Sterling. Less than 24 hours ago you were humiliating me, and now you're offering me a directorship. I don't know if I can trust this. I don't know if I can trust you. Robert nodded slowly. I understand. And you have every right to be suspicious. But Maya, I want you to know one thing. This offer has no expiration date. No matter how much time you need to decide, the door will be open. And if you decide you don't want to work here, I will respect that decision. But please, at least consider it. Maya looked at him for a long moment. There was something different about Robert. The arrogance had vanished. In its place was a man who seemed genuinely repentant, genuinely willing to change. I'll think about it, she finally said, but I'm not promising anything. That's all I'm asking. Maya left the room without looking back, leaving Robert alone with his thoughts. When the door closed, he sat back down in his chair and put his face in his hands. He had started a process he had no idea how would end. But for the first time in a long time, he was willing to face the consequences of his own mistakes. Maya arrived home 2 hours later. She lived in a small apartment in Astoria, Queens, nearly an hour and a half away from Wall Street when traffic was good. It was a simple place, with basic furniture and walls that needed painting, but it was hers. Every cent of the rent had been earned with hard work, and she was proud of that. She threw her bag on the sofa and went straight to the kitchen to make tea. Her hands were still shaking when she picked up the kettle. Everything that had happened in the last 24 hours seemed surreal. She had spent almost 2 years being treated as if she were invisible, enduring indifferent glances, doing work that was far below her capabilities, and now, suddenly, she was being offered a directorship at one of the largest investment firms in the country. She sat at the kitchen table with the cup of tea in her hands and tried to organize her thoughts. Part of her wanted to accept immediately. It was the chance to return to her field, to use all the knowledge she had accumulated over the years again, to prove to herself that she was still capable. But another part of her, the part that had been hurt and humiliated, screamed for her to refuse. How could she work for a man who had treated her that way? How could she trust that he wouldn't go back to being the same arrogant and cruel Robert once the novelty wore off? The phone rang. It was Julie, her colleague from the staffing agency. "Maya, is it true what they're saying? That Robert Sterling offered you a director position?" Maya sighed. "News travels fast. You have no idea. Everyone is talking about it. So, is it true?" "Yes, he offered me the director of risk analysis position." Julie screamed on the other end of the line. "My God, Maya, that's incredible. You're going to accept, right?" "I don't know, Julie. It's complicated." "Complicated how? It's the chance of a lifetime. It's everything you've always wanted. To go back to your field, use your skills, earn a decent salary. What's complicated about that?" Maya took a sip of tea. "The man humiliated me yesterday, Julie, in front of everyone, and now he wants me to work for him as if nothing happened." Julie was silent for a moment. "Look, I understand you're hurt. I would be too, but Maya, you can't let your pride destroy this opportunity. How long have you been trying to get back into the market? How many doors have slammed in your face? How many interviews went into the trash because you were out for too long? And now you have a real chance to start over, and you're thinking about refusing because of pride." "It's not just pride," Maya replied, feeling irritation grow. "It's dignity, it's self-respect. How am I going to work for someone who treated me like garbage? By working well, by showing him and everyone else that you're better than any of them. Maya, you have the chance to walk into that company through the front door as a director and prove your worth. Don't throw that away." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision on her shoulders. "I need to think, Julie. I'll call you later." She hung up the phone and sat in silence. The house was too quiet. In the last 2 years, she had grown used to the solitude, but at that moment, the lack of someone to talk to, someone who could help her make that decision, hurt in a way she didn't expect. Her thoughts went to Lucas, her late husband. If he were there, what would he say? Maya knew the answer. Lucas had always been pragmatic. He would tell her to accept. He would say she had fought too hard to get there, that she had sacrificed too much, and that she couldn't let this chance escape because of bitterness. But Lucas also knew her better than anyone. He knew her pride, her need to be treated with respect, her inability to accept injustice silently. And maybe if he were there, he would also understand why she was hesitating. Maya spent the rest of the night thinking, turning the pros and cons over in her mind. When she finally went to bed at 2 in the morning, she still hadn't reached a conclusion. But one thing she knew for sure. Whatever decision she made, it had to be hers. Not Robert Sterling's, not Julie's, not Lucas's memory. Hers. And for the first time in a long time, Maya Sullivan was determined to choose her own destiny. 2 days later, Maya was back in front of the Sterling Investments building. But this time she didn't enter through the service door that led to the pantry. She crossed the main lobby in her navy blue suit that had been stored in the closet for years and headed straight for the executive elevators. A few people recognized her and watched her with expressions of surprise and curiosity. The decision to accept Robert's offer hadn't been easy. Maya spent the last 48 hours weighing every argument, every feeling, every possible consequence. She called old colleagues, asked for advice, prayed, cried, and in the end, she reached a simple conclusion. She hadn't survived the last 3 years of her life to waste a chance to rebuild everything she had lost. When the elevator doors opened on the 43rd floor, Victoria was waiting with a professional smile. "Welcome, Maya. "Mr. Sterling is waiting for you." Maya followed Victoria down the hallway, feeling the employees' gazes on her. She knew everyone was already aware of the situation. The coffee girl who had become a director. The story must have been told and retold in every corner of the company, likely with various degrees of exaggeration and judgment. Robert stood up when she entered the room. There was visible relief in his eyes. "Maya, you came." "I did, but I need to make a few things clear before I officially accept." Robert made a gesture for her to sit. "I'm listening." Maya remained standing. "First, if I take this position, it won't be out of gratitude or pity. It will be because I am the most qualified person for the role. And I expect to be treated exactly like that. I completely agree. Second, I want total autonomy. If you hired a director of risk analysis, then you need to trust my assessments. I won't be decorative, and I won't simply agree with decisions I consider wrong." Robert nodded. "That's exactly why I'm hiring you. I need someone who has the courage to cross me when necessary. And third," Maya continued, "if at any point you go back to treating me the way you did in that meeting, or if you allow anyone in this company to do so, I'm out. It doesn't matter the salary. It doesn't matter the position. Dignity is not negotiable." Robert was silent for a moment. Then he extended his hand. "You have my word, Maya. That will not happen again." Maya shook his hand, sealing the deal that would change both their lives. Maya's first week as Director of Risk Analysis was intense. Robert made a point of personally introducing her to the entire board, making it clear that she had his total trust and the authority to review any investment decision. The executives' reactions were varied. Some, like Michael, seemed genuinely relieved to have someone with Maya's technical competence on the team. Others, like Frank, maintained a cold courtesy that didn't hide their resentment. Maya built her team quickly, hiring 3 junior analysts who demonstrated both technical ability and a willingness to learn. She implemented new risk assessment protocols, reviewed the company's entire portfolio, and identified several points that needed immediate attention. Her competence was undeniable, and even the most skeptical had to admit she knew exactly what she was doing. But the resistance came from where Maya least expected. Victoria Miller, the analysis manager who had been one of the first to recognize Maya's technical knowledge, began to show clear signs of hostility. During meetings, she questioned every one of Maya's decisions with a tone that bordered on disrespect. She made subtle comments about how some people reached leadership positions for reasons that had nothing to do with merit. Maya tried to handle the situation professionally. She responded to the provocations with data and technical arguments, kept her posture firm, and didn't let herself be shaken. But the tension was growing, and she knew it would eventually explode. The explosion came 3 weeks after Maya took office. In a board meeting, she presented a recommendation to reject a $40 million investment in a tech startup. Her analysis showed that the company had an unsustainable business model and that the growth projections were unrealistic. Victoria was the first to contest. "With all respect, Maya, but I think your analysis is being excessively conservative. This startup has enormous potential." Maya stayed calm. "I understand your point, Victoria, but the numbers don't lie. This company's burn rate is unsustainable. They will need new capital injections every 6 months, and there's no guarantee they'll get them." Victoria crossed her arms. "Or perhaps you simply don't have enough experience with tech startups. After all, your field has always been more traditional, hasn't it?" Maya felt the anger start to boil, but she controlled her voice. "My field has always been risk analysis, Victoria, and risk is risk, whether in startups or traditional funds. The fundamental principles don't change." Frank decided to enter the discussion. "Perhaps we should consider a second opinion. No disrespect to Maya, but it's a $40 million decision." Robert, who until then had been observing in silence, slammed his hand on the table. "No, I hired Maya specifically to do this type of analysis. If she says it's a bad investment, then it's a bad investment. Discussion over." The silence that followed was tense. Victoria looked at Robert with an expression of poorly disguised indignation. Frank just shook his head and looked back at his papers. Maya felt a mix of relief and concern. Robert had defended her, but that also made her an even bigger target. After the meeting, Maya went back to her office and found Michael waiting. "Can I speak with you for a minute?" "Of course, Michael. Come in." He closed the door behind him and sat down. "I want to give you some advice, Maya. You're doing an excellent job and your analyses are impeccable, but you need to be careful. Careful of what? Of Victoria and Frank. They aren't happy with your presence here. They feel you've made them look incompetent and now they're looking for ways to destabilize you. Maya sighed. I know. I'm not naive. Then you need to be prepared. People like them when they feel threatened can be dangerous, and I'm sure they're looking for anything they can use against you. Maya felt a chill. Michael was right, and if there was anything in her past that could be used against her, it was exactly the period after Lucas's illness, the debts she had to take on, the loans she made trying to pay for the treatment. Everything had been paid off eventually, but the records existed, and in the wrong hands, they could be distorted. I'll be careful, she said. Thank you for the warning. But Michael's warning came too late. That same afternoon, Victoria was already executing her plan. She had hired a private investigator to dig into Maya's financial past. And what she found was exactly what she was looking for. Records of emergency loans made 3 years ago in considerable amounts, which took months to be paid off. Victoria compiled all the documents into a dossier and scheduled a meeting with some board members, excluding Robert. In a conference room late that afternoon, she presented her findings with the air of someone who had just uncovered a major scandal. Did you know that our new Director of Risk Analysis had serious financial problems just a few years ago? Loans in very high amounts, accumulated debts. How can we trust the financial health of this company to someone who couldn't even manage her own finances? Frank flipped through the documents with interest. This is concerning, very concerning. Michael, who was also present, felt his stomach churn. Victoria, these loans were made 3 years ago. And from what I see here, they were all paid off. They were paid off, yes, Victoria said with a cold smile. But the question is, why would someone in a stable financial position need to make such large loans? And more importantly, does Robert know about this? The news reached Robert's ears the next day. He was reviewing reports when his assistant knocked on the door with a worried expression. Mr. Sterling, I need to tell you something. There's a dossier circulating about Maya, about financial problems in her past. Robert felt anger explode instantly. Who is circulating this? Victoria Miller. She showed it to some board members yesterday afternoon. Robert stood up abruptly. Ask Victoria and Frank to come here now. 15 minutes later, Victoria and Frank entered the room. Robert's expression left no doubt that trouble was coming. Does someone want to explain to me what the hell is going on? Victoria tried to maintain her composure. Mr. Sterling, we only brought to light some relevant information about— Relevant information! Robert interrupted, his voice cold as ice. You invaded an employee's privacy, hired an investigator behind my back, and are trying to use her personal past to discredit her professionally. Is that what you call relevant information? Victoria blinked, surprised by the reaction. Sir, we just thought you should know. I already knew, Robert lied, deciding on the spot that he would protect Maya in any way necessary. Maya told me about the financial difficulties she faced when her husband was sick. And you know what that tells me about her? That she is a person who made enormous sacrifices for love. That she fought to honor her debts and managed to pay them off. That doesn't make her less qualified. In fact, it makes her more admirable. Frank tried to intervene. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, no. You're going to listen to me now. I brought Maya to this company because she is the best risk analyst I know, because she saved this company twice, and because she has integrity and courage, things that clearly some members of this board lack. Victoria turned pale. Mr. Sterling, What you did was try to destroy a colleague's reputation because you felt threatened by her competence, and that is unacceptable. Victoria, you are suspended for 2 weeks without pay, and if I find out you continue to spread these documents, you will be fired summarily. Is that clear? Victoria left the room with tears of rage in her eyes. Frank tried to say something, but Robert cut him off with a gesture. And you, Frank, I hope you learned something today. In this company, we attack problems, not people. If you disagree with Maya's decisions, bring technical arguments. But if you try to discredit her using her personal past, you're going to have to deal with me. Understood? Yes, sir, Frank murmured before leaving. When he was alone, Robert picked up the phone and called Maya. Maya, I need to see you in my office. Now." 10 minutes later, Maya walked in, clearly worried. What happened? Robert told her everything, about the dossier, about Victoria's attempt to use her past against her, about how he had handled the situation. Maya was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "You defended me. Of course I defended you. Maya, you are part of this team, and no one is going to attack you as long as I'm here." Maya felt the tears finally escape. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. There was someone by her side, someone willing to fight for her. And at that moment, something changed between Maya and Robert. It was no longer just about a job offer or about repairing past mistakes. It was about mutual respect, about recognition, about two people who were learning to trust each other. It was about starting over. 6 months later, Sterling Investments was a different company. Not just in the numbers, which had improved considerably with Maya's precise analyses, but mainly in the culture. Robert had started a transformation process that went far beyond accounting and investments. He began to pay attention to the people who worked for him. He learned the names of the cleaning staff, greeted the security guards, spoke with the receptionists. Small gestures that for him represented a monumental change. Maya became one of the most respected voices in the company. Her analyses were awaited with attention, and even those who initially resisted her presence came to recognize her competence. Victoria, after returning from suspension, resigned. She couldn't handle the shame of what she had tried to do and the way she had been exposed. Maya, surprisingly, felt sorry for her. She understood what it was to feel threatened, what it was to be afraid of losing your place. On a September morning, Robert called a general meeting with all the company's employees. It was something unusual. Usually, important communications came via email or were passed down by managers, but Robert wanted to speak personally to everyone. The internal auditorium was packed when he took the stage. Maya was sitting in the front row next to Michael and other directors. She had no idea what Robert was going to say, but there was something different in his eyes that day, a determination she hadn't seen yet. "Good afternoon, everyone," Robert began, his voice echoing through the space. "I know it's unusual for me to call a meeting with all employees at once, but today I want to speak about something I learned recently, something that changed not just this company, but changed me." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. All eyes were fixed on him. "A few months ago, I made a terrible mistake. In front of the entire board, I humiliated an employee. I treated her as if she had no value, as if her only function was to serve coffee and disappear. I did that because I was used to judging people by the position they held, not by the person they were." Maya felt her heart race. She didn't expect Robert to bring that up publicly. Robert continued, looking directly at her. "That employee was Maya Sullivan, who today is our Director of Risk Analysis. And what I discovered later ashamed me deeply. Maya wasn't just a brilliant economist who had fallen on hard times. She was the analyst who, years ago, saved this company from destruction. She was the most technically qualified person in that entire room, and I didn't see it because I chose not to see it." He paused, letting the words sink in. "For years I built this company based on results, on numbers, on profits. And I forgot that companies are made of people. People with stories, with struggles, with dignity that needs to be respected, regardless of the position they occupy." Robert stepped off the stage and walked to where Maya was sitting. She stood up, not knowing exactly what to do. "Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "in front of everyone present here, I want to thank you. Not just for saving this company twice, but for teaching me something I should have learned a long time ago. That talent has no job title, that dignity is not negotiable, and that sometimes the most valuable people are those we are used to ignoring." Tears streamed down Maya's face uncontrollably. Robert extended his hand and she shook it, but he pulled her into a hug. The entire auditorium erupted in applause. When the hug ended, Robert returned to the microphone. "Starting today, we are implementing structural changes in this company. We are going to create recognition programs for all employees, not just executives. We are going to invest in training and development for anyone who wants to grow. And we are going to ensure that every person who works here is treated with the respect they deserve." In the days that followed, Maya and Robert's story became known throughout the New York financial market. Some romanticized it, turning it into a corporate fairy tale. Others criticized it, saying it was just marketing. But for those inside Sterling Investments, The change was real and palpable. Maya continued doing her job with her usual excellence. She rejected bad investments, approved good ones, and trained her team to think critically and independently. But more than that, she became a symbol, a reminder that the past doesn't define the future, that it's possible to start over, and that dignity and competence go hand in hand. Robert, for his part, discovered that being a better leader didn't make him weaker. On the contrary. The company prospered under a culture of respect and recognition. Employee turnover dropped drastically, productivity increased, and most importantly, he began to sleep better at night, without the weight of the arrogance he had carried for so many years. On a Friday afternoon, 3 months after that historic meeting, Robert called Maya for a talk in his office. She walked in expecting to discuss some report or investment decision, but Robert had something different in mind. "Sit down, Maya. I want to talk about something personal." Maya sat curious. "I'm listening. You know that in the last few months I've learned a lot from you, about humility, about respect, about recognizing people's value, but there's one thing that still bothers me." "What is it?" "The fact that I've never had the chance to know the person behind the professional. I know your career, I know your achievements, I know your struggle, but I don't know who Maya Sullivan is when she's not analyzing financial reports." Maya smiled. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Your dreams, your fears, what makes you happy, what makes you wake up in the morning besides work. Because I realized I built a company full of colleagues but empty of friends. And if there's anyone here I want to build a true friendship with, it's you." Maya felt something warm in her chest. It was the first time in years someone had shown genuine interest in knowing her as a person, not as a professional. For so long, she had defined herself only by work. First as a brilliant analyst, then as a dedicated caregiver, and finally as a resilient survivor. But there was more to her than that. "You know, Robert, I used to be a very different person. Before everything happened, I had hobbies, friends, dreams that had nothing to do with the financial market. I liked reading poetry, walking in the park on Sundays, watching old movies, and somehow, in the middle of the struggle for survival, I left all that behind." Robert leaned forward. "And now, do you want to get those things back?" "I do, but it's hard. After so much time defining yourself only by work and struggle, it's strange to remember that life exists beyond that." "Then how about we start slow? Sunday, if you don't have anything planned, we could go to Central Park. Walk, talk, just be two people trying to remember what it's like to live, not just survive." Maya looked at him for a long moment. She saw in Robert no longer the arrogant man who had humiliated her, but someone genuinely trying to be better. Someone who, just like her, was learning to rebuild his life on more solid foundations. "Sunday sounds good," she said. And for the first time in a long time, her smile was completely genuine. The months that followed brought an unexpected friendship between Maya and Robert. Walks in the park became a Sunday ritual. Conversations about life, about regrets, about deferred dreams. Robert began to see the world through Maya's eyes, understanding that success isn't measured only in assets. Maya, in turn, learned to trust again, to open her heart without fear of being hurt. And Sterling Investments continued to prosper, not despite the change, but because of it, because they discovered that truly successful companies are those where people are valued, where talents are recognized regardless of titles, and where human dignity comes before profits. A year after that fateful meeting where it all began, Maya was back in the main conference room. But this time she was the one at the front presenting the annual results for the risk analysis department. The room was full of executives, external investors and board members. And in the back, serving coffee, was a new contracted employee, a young woman who looked nervous. Maya paused her presentation and walked over to her. "What is your name?" The girl looked startled. "Amanda, ma'am." "Amanda, thank you for the coffee. You're doing an excellent job." Maya returned to the front of the room and continued the presentation. But before resuming, she looked at Robert and then at everyone present. "I just want to say one thing before I continue. A year ago, I was in that young woman's place back there, and if it hadn't been for someone having the courage to see me as more than just a coffee server, I wouldn't be here today. So, whenever you look at any employee in this company, remember, talent has no uniform. Dignity doesn't depend on a job title. And the greatest transformations happen when we learn to see the value in every person. The silence that followed was broken by Robert's applause, and then everyone else joined in. Amanda in the back had tears in her eyes. That story that began with humiliation, pain, and arrogance had transformed into something greater. It had become about redemption, about second chances, about the human capacity to change and grow. Maya and Robert had found in each other not just professional allies, but people who challenged them to be better versions of themselves. And when Maya left that room that day, she was no longer the broken woman who had accepted serving coffee to survive. She was a complete woman, fulfilled, respected, not because her title changed, but because she had never lost her essence. And finally, the world around her learned to see it. Sometimes life puts us in the most unlikely places to teach us the most important lessons. And sometimes a single courageous answer is all we need to change not just our destiny, but the destiny of everyone around us. Maya Sullivan proved that true value is not in the position we occupy, but in the person we choose to be every day, regardless of circumstances. And Robert Sterling learned that power without empathy is tyranny, and that a leader's greatest strength lies in recognizing and valuing the humanity of every person under their responsibility. This is the story of two people who met at the worst possible moment and mutually transformed into the best they could be. A story about dignity, respect, starting over, and the courage to be truly human. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Maya and Robert has touched your heart deeply. If you were moved by this journey of transformation, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Was it when Maya responded with courage, when Robert apologized, or when he defended her publicly? Every day we bring intense stories like this that reveal the deepest side of the human soul, speaking of dignity, respect, and the capacity we all have to start over. We'll see you in the next episode with another story that will make you reflect on what